So I grew up in a very Jewish household. Anytime a Jew did something good, my parents would go, oh, they're Jewish. It'd be the first thing they would, Steven Spielberg, he's a Jew. But there's a flip side to that as well. Bernie Madoff. Oh my God. Do you know what this looks like for the Jews? What are they going to think about us? Same thing with Harvey Weinstein, Elliot Spitzer. I could keep going. Trust me, my mother always keeps going. She tells me all of them. And what's interesting is that reaction is actually deeply built in to what Judaism is. Danielle Hartman, I was studying, I've told you, at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, and he just came out with a book called Who Are the Jews and Who Are We Going to Become? It's a fantastic book. And he breaks down Judaism into two separate buckets. He says the very first part of Judaism, I'll start over here, is Genesis Judaism. Because Genesis Judaism is a particular type of Judaism. It's peoplehood. It's the reason why I matter is because who I'm related to. It actually doesn't matter much what I do. It's who I'm related to. Think about the people in Genesis. They're not very good people. You don't want your kids to turn out like most of the people in Genesis. I often think when I see my kids fighting, I'm like, doing better than the Torah. Like it's better than Cain and Abel, or the brothers that are like selling their siblings off to slavery, which none of my kids have done yet. And that's really what it's about. I mean, it's so built in, this idea is that when you're in, that being in the Jewish family, I don't say, Bernie Madoff, he's out. No, you say, this is bad for the Jews. What is it going to look? He's a Jew. What is it going to look like for us? Because he's part of us, and he represents us. It goes as far as with conversion. The moment that you convert in Judaism and you go into the mikveh and you become a Jew, you're a Jew. The rest of your life, you are a Jew. You can be a bad Jew, but you're a Jew. Just a few years ago, I had one of my students call me and say, Rabbi, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have converted. I need to be unconverted. I go, I'm sorry. I don't have like an unmikvah. I can't unconvert you. Once you're in, you're in. Even Bernie Madoff, all these people, we don't kick them out because they're part of that group. But that is just Genesis Judaism. See, over here in our next chapter is Exodus Judaism. Now, Exodus Judaism is very different. Exodus Judaism is all about behavior. It's what I do in the world. When we listen to Cantor Luck, when he was singing that part, the V'ahavta, and you shall love your Lord your God with all the things that you do, that's why he was singing that, because it's all about the behaviors that you do. But then there's this other character in that story, which is Moses. Now, Moses is this really bizarre combo of Genesis and Exodus. He's very forward-thinking. He's in front of his generation. And so for him, when he goes up on Sinai and he gets the Ten Commandments, do you remember what they're doing below? Remember they're building a little something? The golden calf. They're literally building the thing it says on the tablets. Like, don't do that. They're like, we're going to do that. And he comes down, and what does he do? Because if I'm purely an Exodus Jew and I'm just behavior, they just broke all the behaviors you're not supposed to do. But he's a mix because he's also a Genesis Jew. And he's shocked. And he takes the tablets and he breaks them. And he reprimands them and he defends them to God. Because he goes, those are my people, those are your people. And it's the beginning of this combination of the two. of saying, how do you have this ecstatic moment at Sinai, but also build an infrastructure to be able to carry out these behaviors? And then as the Torah continues, we get to Deuteronomy. We're in Ve'et Hanan. That's where we are this week in the Torah portion. Now, Deuteronomy is different because that moment of Sinai, the revelation, it doesn't happen all the time. The dome hasn't opened up lately. You basically need to build a system. This sanctuary is built as if it's Sinai. Most people don't know that. You all are the people of Israel. This is Mount Sinai. The top of the mountain is the Torah, which is the ark. That's why it's built this way. We're all in this play together. So, inside of Deuteronomy, the question then becomes, how do I operationalize this? Because that's what Deuteronomy is trying to do, is actually building this system into our lives. Because if you build it into your lives, Moses sees the future, you could call him an entrepreneur, and he says, oh, this is big. If we combine the idea of behavior with the idea of you're actually part of a community, it's not about the I, it's about the we. But it's not just about the we, it's the we together in order to serve something much bigger. That is the magic spot. And it's there where he sees it. And if we think about who they are in Deuteronomy, they're not so impressive yet. Like it's a bunch of vagabonds sitting in the desert. Like they escaped Egypt, but they haven't accomplished anything. And in the middle of this is what he writes in this week's Torah portion. Observe them faithfully. He's talking about the commandments. For that will be proof of your wisdom and discernment to other peoples, who on hearing of all of these laws will say, quote, surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what great nation is there that has a God so close at hand as is our God whenever we call? That's the Genesis Judaism. Or what great nation has laws and rules as perfect as this teaching that I set before you this day? He dreams that this is going to be this incredible nation because they've figured out this combination of serving something bigger than yourself in a collective nature. Now, the early commentators, if we think about what their lens is, they're looking quite narrow just on the Jews. They think, well, this is going to mean that we're great. We're going to be wonderful. But if you haven't checked lately, we don't have a lot of market share in the world. We're still relatively small. It's like an area we probably should be working on here. But it's Nachmanides in the 12th century that he thinks that the meaning of this passage and the statutes and the ordinances that were given is that it's going to bring honor from others on how they see us. But Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, who you know I love, he actually zooms his lens back. And he says, no. This is much, much bigger. Like, sure, yes, us Jews we're relatively small, but Judeo, Christian, Islamic values together have changed the face of the world. It's what Western civilization is. Today, as we sit here, more than half of the planet lives a life with an idea of that there's a behavior set which we need to follow. In the influence, if you look at the arc of history, history has dramatically changed. In each generation, you remember Martin Luther King said the arc of history, it always bends towards justice. A decade can seem terrible, but if you zoom back and you look at 100 years, we're doing pretty well. If you think about during the French Revolution, beheading, it's what they did. Think about the world's reaction to ISIS. It's not a very long window, and we had a radically different reaction, because we're slowly bending in the right direction. Even when we got to America with John Adams, our second president, this is what he wrote. It's my best John Adams impersonation. Here I'll go. I will insist that the Hebrews have done more to civilize men than any other nation. If I were an atheist and believed in blind eternal fate, I should still believe that fate had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilizing the nations. If I were an atheist, of the other sect, who believed or pretend to believe that all is ordered by chance. I should believe that chance had ordered the Jews to preserve and propagate to all mankind the doctrine of supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty, sovereign of the universe, which I believe to be the great essential principle of all morality and consequently of all of civilization. That's what Deuteronomy did. Deuteronomy came along and tried to combine these two and to operationalize it into the world where we actually see that we're a collective and we're a community, and it's not just about me, but I'm serving something much bigger than me. But, because you know with a rabbi, there's always going to be a but. We're now living in a society that is bifurcated. We're living in a society that is focusing more and more on the I. More and more on a society that is maybe not serving something greater than us, but might be serving a person or a party. And each one of those is meant to serve something much higher. And when you get to that moment when you've lost perspective on where you're going or what your ultimate mission and purpose is, that's when society begins to crumble. And you see the Jewish calendar, which Cantor Luck was just referencing, which is why he sang Nachamu about comfort, was just a few days ago, was Tisha B'Av, which is the commemoration of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans. Now, to give context to what actually happened here, Jerusalem at the time, arguably, is the most fortified city in the entire world. And Rome barely beat it. But how did it beat it? Because actually it was so fortified, inside those walls, which no one could penetrate, they had enough food for 7 years. So why did it fall so quickly? Well, because they started to fight with each other. The rabbis teach it never had to do with the Romans. It always had to do with us. Inside those walls where they were protected, they started fighting. They forgot how to behave with each other. They forgot that they were one people, and they forgot they were serving something bigger than themselves, and they actually burned down the food stores. And because of that, we starved inside of Jerusalem. And the Romans barely made it in, which is why in Jewish tradition, we don't actually blame the Romans for our destruction. We blame us for our destruction. And there's a lesson that we can learn as American Jews as we sit here and we look forward and we look at the land we're in when we're in a bifurcated society. When we talk about blue states or red states or red states or blue states or what party we're in, and we forget that we're this collective cohesion trying to answer something much bigger. There's a saying that if you want to understand American exceptionalism, you can explain American exceptionalism in 4 words. Ocean, ocean, Canada, Mexico. San Francisco's never been attacked. In World War II, we kept building. In World War I, we kept building. New York wasn't attacked. Nothing has ever been attacked here. We continue to grow. Europe has the challenges. Israel has challenges. Ukraine, we do not. Our threat has never been from the outside. The Jewish people in Jerusalem, the threat was never actually from the Romans because we were ready for it. The threat always came from the inside. The lesson that Moses, that he's whispering across and he's begging to tell us is the way forward. Because remember, the message doesn't take place when they've accomplished it. They haven't done anything yet. They're sitting in the desert. They're looking across the valley at Israel of what could be. The Torah never gets to Israel. It's about a potential of what could be if you remember that it's about how you behave in the universe and what you do with your actions, with your time here, and you act as a collective together. But not just to serve each other, because what's the point? You actually should be working together with your behaviors to change something much bigger than you. And it's the foundation of who we are in this country. On every single bill that we have, it says, "In God we trust." That's why it's there. The Constitution, America, who we are as a nation, is meant to serve something much bigger than just us. And this Shabbat, Moses, he's whispering at all of us to think about where we are, to think about what we're doing, how we see the other, and to remind ourselves of what our actual purpose is. Shabbat Shalom.